Williams sends South Africa into the semi-finals for the first time since 2000. Goal, Bafana, Bafana!
Across the world, football is considered the beautiful game, a game that has brought people together for years and years, and South Africa is no different. From the streets of Orlando, Soweto, to the streets of Sao Paulo, Brazil, football has had a hand in many lives. In South Africa, football is played by people young and old, and Johannesburg has been a core piece in the development of football in the nation. Since 1994, football has changed and developed to better reflect the country we are today. And some of those changes have been great, and others not so much, but it is all a work in progress. The evolution of SAFA, the establishment of the PSL, and the growth of Bafana Bafana are all great things that democracy has brought to the nation's football field. From 1994 until the present, developing young players in football has been essential to creating a professional and well-oiled footballing machine. In South Africa, football development has had numerous ups and downs in various phases. This episode will look at the development of football structures and facilities in South Africa, the teams, the leagues, and it'll feature some commentary from coaches and players about how football development works in South Africa and the differences between SA and the rest of the world. We're in for a deep dive. Firstly, let's take a look at the football facilities. The football facilities in Johannesburg have faced some turbulence. During the apartheid regime, many of the best sporting facilities in the country were reserved for white people, and the ones reserved for black, coloured, and Indian people were of a much lower standard. The Rand Stadium is one of the oldest stadiums in Johannesburg, built somewhere between 1949 and 1951 in Rosettenville, a suburb in the south of Johannesburg. This stadium saw the country's first ever multiracial national football team, when SA played against Argentina in 1976, under the name the International 11, to avoid being banned by FIFA during the apartheid era. This was the first footballing arena in the city, and it has since hosted tons of football games, like the 2009 Nedbank Cup final between the University of Pretoria and Moroka Swallows. This is a much revered part of Johannesburg's history of football. Even despite its modern makeover, it still held its old scoreboard to hold a piece of South Africa's footballing history. The Rand Stadium was one of many stadiums that played a major role in the legacy of football in the city. 4 stadiums in Joburg, including the Rand, were used for the massive 2010 FIFA World Cup. These were FNB, Ellis Park, Orlando Stadium, and the Rand, which are still major parts of South African football in the present day. Even today, the Rand Stadium is still considered one of the best surfaces to play on across the country. During the 2010 FIFA World Cup, South Africa carved a very important place in football history by becoming the first African country to host a World Cup. So, having Joburg make up the bulk of the playing fields and even host the FIFA headquarters was a testament to the city's influence in South African soccer. Despite this progression in facilities, many young players do not have access to appropriate fields and equipment to train and further their skill sets. A big part of development is reliant on training and practice to fix their flaws, but football does not have as big of an investment as necessary to give more people access to the adequate facilities. In SA, development football teams tend to not have sponsors, which leaves them high and dry financially and unfit to compete against teams with more resources. In an article, Sia Pongo from Supersport Schools mentions how a lack of financial investment has detriments to the quality of football in the country. He cited a New York Times article that described how, in 2000, Germany's football team was performing poorly at the European Championship, and a decision was taken to invest $1 billion into the country's youth programs. This allowed them to have more experienced coaches, better training facilities, and academies, which ultimately led to slow but steady progression for the German football squads, amalgamating in their historic 2014 FIFA World Cup victory. Gwynne Barry, a well-established football coach from Wales, has been coaching football players for years in over 30 countries, including South Africa. Here, he mentions what he thinks makes European footballers perform better than players from other parts of the world.
I think I've actually coached in 43 different countries now altogether. I just worked in the Caribbean over the summer. I think the big difference really is structuring around football. I see Africa and many other countries around the world as well as being the UK and Europe maybe 40, 50 years ago. I think what's happened in Europe, driven a lot by the Premier League football and the structure in professional football, but is the organisation now down through grassroots football. football in Europe now is very, very well organised and very, very well structured. There's lots of good opportunities for young players to be able to get good coaching, to get into good clubs that have welfare officers and child protection policies and licensed and trained coaches. I think the big difference in Africa, Asia, and even South America is that for a lot of coaches, those qualifications are not readily available they can't get on courses. The courses are very expensive. And consequently, maybe they're not as well educated as you'd like them to be. And that has a knock-on effect then in the delivery of the sessions and the structure in the sessions and how the development process is put together, really. But my gut feeling is that there is a bit of a lag there, but the countries will catch up with Europe. Europe's always going to be a little bit in front because of the financial side of things, really. But I can see the gap closing. Again, it might take 10 or 20 years to put structures into place, but definitely it will catch up because it will be dragged along by the European countries predominantly. So yeah, so that's probably one of the biggest differences structuring, really.
This makes it especially clear that investment and finances are a big part of the performance of many teams and players. Investment and time are always necessary to produce quality results, and that is a key factor in creating the youth development structures that the country needs. Apart from the clear importance of stellar facilities and fancy equipment, football can only improve with good development structures, and in the past 30 years, South Africa has worked to build these structures. There is a very long way to go, but some progress has been made and continues to be made. You may be wondering, what does the term development structures even refer to? Well, I use the term in this context to talk about the ecosystem of leagues and institutions across the country that deal with training young football players from when they start playing football at 6 or so, all the way until they make their professional debuts. Starting with institutions, the International Federation of Association Football, or FIFA, is in charge of regulating and governing football, beach soccer, and futsal across the world. This body oversees all football-related competitions across its 211 national associations. In South Africa, that association is SAFA, the South African Football Association, which is directly in charge of all football activities and competitions in the country, from official development leagues and tournaments to the professional leagues and tournaments for the national team and the professional first flight, the Premier Soccer League. In SA, football development is on the rise, and the prominence and structure of leagues like the Motsepe League and the National First Division are a testament to the ranks that players have to climb to make it to the top flight. The ABC Motsepe League, which was known as the Vodacom League until 2012, began in 1998 as the nation's third tier of football. The league consists of 144 teams split into 9 divisions across the country's different provinces. Each provincial division consists of 16 teams who compete, and the winner is then promoted to the National First Division, which is the country's official second-tier league, just behind the PSL. Outside of the Motsepe League, in the lower age groups, each province has its own league that is still overseen by SAFA. In Gauteng, the Gauteng Development League, or GDL, is the primary league that features competitions for players in the under 13 to under 19 age groups. It began in 2011, mainly featuring development academy versions of professional PSL teams, but it widened its reach in 2017 to feature more teams outside of professional PSL team academies. The GDL features 24 teams that compete in a formal league structure to become champions. Some players from the GDL get the chance to join professional teams in the Motsepe League, the PSL Reserve League called the DStv Diski Challenge, or DDC, and even to play abroad. The DDC was formed by MultiChoice in 2014 as a reserve league for the Premier Soccer League. This allowed them to field players from that league into the PSL teams whenever it was necessary. However, it did not act as a replacement for the NFD. The DDC has brought around players like Percy Tau, Lyle Foster, and Keegan Dolly, to name a few, and is responsible for some of the players in the Bafana Bafana national team. On a national level, development is still a big part of the team. The first team for Bafana Bafana only comprises players who already play for the first team of professional clubs, but even national football teams have their own development structure. The national team development structures are split into age groups, and young players are often scouted or taken to trials to be a part of those teams. The age groups tend to be from under 15 up to under 23, where they compete in international tournaments within those age groups for both men and women's soccer. The best players in these teams may be scouted to play for Banyana Banyana or Bafana Bafana's first teams. In general, development is the core of all things football. It is necessary to create functional systems and clear paths for players to follow to reach the big leagues, and hopefully make South Africa a top contender in global soccer. To tell us a little bit more about that is Bevan Fransman. He is currently a youth football coach, but he has made his name as a professional footballer in SA and beyond. Having played for SuperSport FC, Kaizer Chiefs, and even Bafana Bafana, he has a great deal of experience on the football field. He now spends his time training young footballers in the GDL and hoping to equip them with the skills to make it professionally.
The technical side, we have a lot of technically gifted players. I think at where I'm coaching at the moment, under 19 level, it's more to deal with tactics, the finer details of the game, managing things. Outside of football, it's very challenging in terms of you're dealing with 22, 23 different characters, where as a player you worry about yourself and you go home to your family and your loved ones, and you deal with your own issues. But here I'm dealing with 23 different young men, and yeah, very challenging. I think we need to nurture these boys and actually look after them much more closely than we are at the development structure. A lot of things are taken for granted, but I think in terms of the economics behind it, there's no way getting away from the economic impact that's needed in development football. You know, it's all good and well we say let's develop and if you want to have academy, but it costs money. It costs money. Real cash needs to be poured in, and investment, and I think we need to look at it as investing in the people more than investing in the sport. We're developing a lot of young talents, which is fantastic, but it's very localized to certain football clubs, or if you want to say institutions. I'm very glad that the varsity league has come up in the last few years. It gives young players just another avenue, another shot at reaching a pro level if they pursue that, if not for the academic route. I think while I was at Highlands Park, we recruited 2 players out of TUT, which was fantastic. We recruited Nsamanga out of UJ, Johannesburg also. So it just shows there is a level of good coaches, and they are receiving good coaching for them to reach a pro level at varsity league. The introduction of DDC has a massive impact on the young guys. There's something for them to aim at, another target that I think guys who are 15, 16 already aim to say, hey, in 2 years time I'll be of age to play DDC. So I think that's doing great stuff. GDL is still new in terms of its development and running, but it's getting there. There's you can't just start up and not have any creases. You have to iron out the creases as time goes by.
Over the years, South Africa has strived to improve our football. Now, most PSL clubs have their own youth development academies, and Orlando Pirates even has their own youth tournament called the Pirates Cup. Since 1994, SAFA has tried to structure youth football to make it more conducive to creating stellar results, and there's been a slight improvement in the success of our teams. Mamelodi Sundowns is now considered one of the best teams in Africa. Bafana Bafana recently placed 3rd in the African Cup of Nations, and within the squad itself, we're starting to see a rise in players who are the products of our own youth development structures. So, noting some of the initiatives I've discussed throughout this episode, it's clear that there's been some improvements, but there's always room for more, and hopefully we'll get to see those in the years to come. Thank you for listening to this episode of Soccer in the City, and I hope that this was an interesting and informative look at football development in Joburg and beyond.